All right, Andrew.
Hey man.
Last, last. I think that's the last episode for the year, no?
Yes, indeed.
Yes. Um, I was thinking about, you know, doing it a little bit more personally, just not to riff on some political topics or.
Yeah, I have something personal to share.
Oh, really?
Also, yeah.
Oh, nice. Okay, maybe we. I don't know what is it, but maybe there's a thing that will converge in these two things.
Well, I discovered that the remedy to AI, in general, is poetry. I need to write poetry, so I'm writing a lot of poetry. That's
Right.
my thing at the moment.
Mm.
Yeah, I know you said like, oh, poets are the most suspicious individuals you could ever come
No,
across.
not at all.
I'm teasing,
No, I'm
but
publishing poetry with my publishing house, so that's not
you
an
are,
issue.
hey. Yeah. What I discovered also, there was two things I discovered. One is that I love writing poetry, and I want to sort of distance myself from even caring if it's good or not. I just want to do it. I used to write songs, and now I'm writing poems. I also discovered that when I feel an ache, a pain, something like I don't feel good, right? It could be anxiety, it could be like I just feel like shit. It's the perfect moment to write a poem or to write
Right.
something because it's a way of sort of opening up a new kind of window for yourself, a vista, something because turning the world upside down on its head, or so I find it like I don't like to think of art as therapy, but I find it helps my being. It helps me breathe. It helps me feel
Right.
better in this world of internet, especially in this world of internet and newsreels and all this shit, because there's a choice I could make in that moment. Should I read the New York Times and what's happening in Gaza and get depressed, or follow Twitter and look at somebody's ass on Twitter, or write a
As on
poem?
Twitter? Who's as? Whose ass are
Everybody,
you looking
asses are everywhere. They're just all over my Facebook feed. All I get is somebody's
at?
ass.
I think that's the AI messing with you.
I guess the AI is messy, and I'm not even a porn guy. I don't watch porn, but every time I turn on Facebook, there's somebody's ass in my face, and so I could look at that, which is fine, somewhat distracting and somewhat
Yeah.
but or I could look at some children's brains being blown apart in
Yeah.
Gaza, or I could write a poem or make some tea or do something a little bit more elevated. Anyway, so that's poetry, I think, is the remedy to AI. That's my conclusion.
Well, it is certainly, and it's strange that you say that because incidentally, I was thinking about why wouldn't you publish a book? I was thinking about this yesterday because you write so much, so many papers, so many articles, and
Mm.
and to publish that with Parallax, I mean that would be great. Even poems or whatever. As I said, I do publish poems with my German publishing house because I think the it, you have to. It's a thing of language and how you use language, and if you only use, let's say, concrete operational modernistic language to approach the phenomena of our world, you kind of limit yourself in what you can perceive and what
Hmm.
you can experience. But poetry and poems and all of these kinds of wide experiments that open up your perception and your experiential interaction with the world, and I like those kind of things.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and also just I've also found that I started writing like prosaic things since 2015. Commentaries on this and that was coming up, and just because that was what was going on at the time, there was some need to respond to all these things that were happening in the culture, I
Yeah.
guess, since Trump. And so I started writing these essays that got kind of popular. And then at a certain point, I felt like they were being written by AI. Like there's just nothing I could say that wasn't already being said, and that I was just repeating things that I had heard, and that there's nothing kind of it could be the writing could become very machine like,
Right.
and if it's in prose. And then I feel like if I write in prose now, there's all these the machines that are going to come in and fix my language and make it easy for me and all that kind of thing. you can write a poem on ChatGPT, but everybody knows it's shit. I mean, I think the secret also to writing poetry is it has to be awkward. It has to be bad. It has to be sort of not bad, not bad. It has to be good, but good in the sense of bad, if that makes any sense, right? It has to be not polished, because everything just gets polished up by machines so easily. So unpolished kind of artifacts. That's what I'm kind of
I
interested
don't
in
know what you
doing.
mean, because I mean the greatest poems are kind of polished, and they are the greatest ones because they are like using different hexameters and different styles, and it's
No,
I
that's German. I'm talking about Charles Bukowski here, okay? I'm not talking about Holderlin or, I'm talking about Charles Bukowski who has these like beautiful one-liners and
it's
or
not
E. E.
German, it's
Cummings,
English.
which who doesn't use capital letters or
The English romantic, writers, or even the modern ones. I mean, there is an art form embedded
absolutely.
within. So, and it's not just this wild Charles Bukowski thing. I mean, you can do this, sure, and this completely, legitimate. But I'm saying, you can also do it in a classical way where there's a certain structure to it, and that's not necessarily German.
No, no, I agree. I no, I fully agree. I'm just saying that that's not what I want to do, and that's not what I'm like. I got very good at writing songs at one point, and a song is a very strict form, right? You have verses and a chorus. It's like a sonnet. You have to compress everything into a form, right? In a song, and you can bend the rules a little bit. There has to be a melody, right? So a song is it's a strict form, and I'm not
Right.
I'm not arguing against that. I think that's absolutely necessary, but there's also the opposite movement, which is the deconstructive of language movement, which James Joyce and people like that
Yeah.
brought on the table, and that is kind of like there's a need to break down things when they become too structured, and I think that's why the kind of writing I'm doing right now is sort of a reaction to AI, to mechanical things becoming too hyper controlled and hyper structured, and so I'm in an experimental mode. But I know like people like my friend Owen, who studied classical mythology and things. He's very good at writing in that particular style. But
It's also, when you look at, when you try to, I'm sorry, when you have an urge because you want to express something, you don't know what it is. You're looking for, I don't know if it's the same for you, but when I have the urge to write, I'm always looking for something. And
mhm,
with all the things that I'm doing, writing is the closest to my heart, basically. And always, when I start to write, some light goes on, and I
yeah,
rediscover a part of myself. But there's also always like a quest, because there's because you could describe a nonfiction. You can approach a nonfiction topic in a classical way, but you also, what always kind of bugs me is the issue of language itself. And it's like, uh, finding new ways of approaching a topic which is unknown. And there's
mhm,
always something unknown which is interesting to me, not only in the topic but in the way I'm approaching this.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm not arguing like first, writing in a way that the naive kind of school of writing where you write like a child or something. I'm not really arguing for that. I think there has to be a state of mind expressed. So there has to be there has to be an art behind it on some level. But the free style of writing is a bit more like jazz. You have different, like, and that's all the people, the beat poets and whatnot, got very good at that. They weren't writing in a European style. They were writing in a style of jazz, which is like modal jazz. Is you have a bunch of sort of themes and you kind of return to them, and you kind of, so it's very loose,
Yeah.
but it has to be authentic. Like Miles Davis's trumpet. It's very he can go many places with it, but it's not that complex melodically, but he can go many places with it, and it's the authenticity of the voice which carries it. So that's kind of how my mind works as a North American, a dyslexic, guy who brought up on Allen Ginsberg and things like that, and Henry Miller and Jack Kerouac and all these guys that I read in my 20s, and then Ian Cummings and then Joyce and all these people who are sort of, they were looking for music and language rather than uh, you know you know I think strict forms are good, but again, we're living in a world that is that's such becoming such a cage. It seems like that you need to have this sort of movement of dynamite, to the
Yeah, I think most powerful it becomes when you can combine these two things. When you can
sure.
combine classical form with the expressive, deconstructive kind of modes and create something, that is
Hmm.
truly powerful,
Hmm. Hmm.
So it's like,
Yeah.
so what
Yeah.
Picasso did, like the mastery, when he studied the classical painting, and then the older he get, the more free uh, he was in creating his artworks, and these completely idiosyncratic kind of ways of painting the same terrace over and over again. It's just amazing. It is so powerful, really. But
And he wasn't afraid to be act like to fail, right?
right.
He wasn't afraid to have his painting be a draft, right? He wasn't afraid. He didn't have. He was unperfecting himself as he goes along, rather than perfecting oneself towards. And that was the perfection, was his ability to, you know. So it's kind of like how do I break down my reified structures of thinking, to create some. How do I un? It's like unschool, unlearn, mechanicalize myself, which is actually, there is a discipline to that. It's not a loose free hippie thing, but it's still an undoing, rather
You
than
know what it is?
an
It is
undressing process.
sacrifice. It's a
Hmm.
sacrifice, because if you really want to invest in anything, be it like art or relationship or whatever, it's like if you really want to have, a meaningful and a deep experience, you need to sacrifice something,
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
I'm always kind of, um, you know, what do I want to say? I'm always like so intrigued by this very fact that people want the one thing, but they don't want the other thing. They want to be
Hmm.
like exceptional, but they don't want to sacrifice. And it's
Hmm.
like, be it like in relationships, like if you want to have a deep relationship, like you have to sacrifice something meaningful. I think we talked about this, and the same is true in relationship to art.
Hmm.
You have to find that that gives you boundaries, and to sacrifice that, and then
Yeah.
to
Yeah, absolutely. And this morning, for example, just on a banal level, like I woke up and I was feeling a little bit, foggy and in the morning, and then I had to sacrifice my moment of, hedonistic forgetfulness on internet, or movies or TV or whatever it happens to be, to sit and not plug in, not engage with that, and engage in something else. And that's a struggle, I think,
yeah.
today, because how do we have a clear voice when we're inhabited by so many ghosts, so many other voices, so many talking heads, and so many
I
philosophies,
think
and
that's the issue with these. I mean, we talked about this before, about this kind of literature, which I call like Americana. These kinds of literature that, um, I think that comes from America, as like quasi spiritual, quasi philosophical, quasi psychological, but really never. It's like I like literature that sacrifices something, that's not just, a regurgitation of what came before, but it's like, you feel that there's a struggle in there. You feel there's a sacrifice, not only for the author, but also, for the issue at hand. And
hmm
with these, literature coming from, from our liminal sphere, this kind of literature, I never feel there's a big of a sacrifice there. It's always a selling point. Some always, there's no, at least that's my feeling. There's never really like a deep sacrifice in it, you
Mm,
know?
mm, yeah. Well, yeah, the deep sacrifice is yeah, I guess is when you become uncompromising on some level of what you're expressing, and when you kind of turn your back to the audience, It's like I saw Bob Dylan as an old man play, and he was like, he had his back to the audience practically the whole time. He was just
Yeah,
that he sacrificed the audience, and a lot of the people didn't know what the fuck he was doing because he was
yeah,
doing new shit, and he didn't want to just play the old songs. Like he didn't want to just do the repetition. He didn't want to give people everything he didn't want to give people what they wanted. And we have to sacrifice that also, like giving people what they want and need.
exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly, because it's like if you what I consider a good book is a book that challenges worldviews,
yeah.
or my ways, that challenges my ways of thinking, or by extension like challenges a culture's way of perception the world, and a culture's worldview. And so it's like when you read Giorgio Agamben, Sloterdijk, it's like they they found a way, and that's why they're great philosophers. They found a way to like completely charge and change the way we are perceiving the world. And it's like you read that, and you're confronted, and you have to sacrifice, and that's a completely different kind of literature than this kind of new age capitalistic way of that's permeated the American culture since the 70s, basically, since
Hmm.
the 80s. It's like it's never. I've just like increasingly issues with these kinds of books.
Yeah,
you know
yeah. Well, like there's different modes of expression. There's the philosophical mode. There's the self-help mode. There's the, you know, but the artistic level. I don't know. Like, is it supposed to challenge anything at all? Even, I mean, is it supposed to be critical of anything, or is it just, is it something even beyond that?
the artistic expression, you mean?
Yeah, yeah. I think it's something beyond being critical, or
Right.
beyond philosophy in a sense,
Yes,
right?
I think so too.
It's beyond philosophy. Sorry, friends who are philosophers. We love and respect you, but mm,
No, it's like if you I mean, these are different kinds of spheres of engagement. Art is always, the has always something to do with distorting or intuiting, different modes of perception, whatnot. And philosophy is always about explaining. Um,
yeah, yeah. I was
the-
thinking about that, and I was thinking about why I'm sort of anti-philosophy. I'm not anti-philosophy, but there's part of me that is sort of really wants to be anti-philosophy, not because I don't respect philosophers or how great they are. We know several really fantastic philosophers who are just completely dedicated to that craft, and I absolutely respect that. But the move I want to make is not the philosophical one, not the, you know not I want to unwisdom. I want to unmake, I want to untheorize, I want to unconcept things. I guess that was a bit Heidegger's thing as well. Heidegger's thing was like he saw that it reached a decadence, and tried to undo it by making more philosophy about unmaking philosophy in a way, um, creating a clearing and all that sort of thing. But so so I've always liked the anti-philosophers more than the pure philosophers. I've always liked Nietzsche and Heidegger,
Mhm.
but but again, that's just an expression of where I think my particular soul is gravitates towards, not
Yeah.
commentary on anybody else's. I was reading a quote by Bukowski, who I like very much. Bukowski was saying that, like, if you feel like you're losing your soul, you still have a soul to lose.
Right.
And I like that quote. That's something like how I feel when I'm writing poetry.
Mm.
I feel like I'm losing my soul in this world because the world is so soulless. And then this is sort of, oh, I'm tasting the remedy of that.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm just, intrigued about also the history of kind of poetry, and
Mm-hmm.
how it goes through iterations and stages, and
Yeah.
be more realistic and then more, Dadaistic. And
Mm-hmm.
I think, like, it took me a long time to really understand Dadaism and this kind of poetry where it's just um, invocative in a way that modern poetry could never do this. And so there are, in Germany, some, let's say, occult circles that exclusively work with poetry because, the invocative power of language and of poetry. It's like you're doing a ritual, in automatic writing, especially if it's done, if you do automatic, poetry in forms of automatic writing, so you can,
Mm-hmm.
invoke these kinds of powers and archetypes and change your perception of the world. I always love this kind of experimental mode of engaging with the world because, you know half of it and half of it you don't, and that's the interesting thing,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
you
Right.
know.
That's why you have to invoke the muse. So for me, it's like the process of writing right now involves a serious evocation, of the muse,
Yeah,
of the goddess, if you like, you know, and it is I almost say ritualistic and religious and all these kind of things. Even though whatever comes out the other end, you might not recognize that, but this invocation thing is something that people have kind of forgotten how to do. It needs to
yeah,
be relearned, a kind of an invocation, because I think everything is about preparation, right? So you prepare and you prepare and you prepare and you prepare and you prepare, and then something happens quite easily. But 99% of it is preparation and invocation and inviting the energies into your body and asking them to take over from your own banal ego, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm still wondering, you know about this part of sacrifice and pain, like in
Mm,
art, in life,
mm,
in
mm,
relationship.
mm,
It's like if you could make the greatest, for you, the greatest poem, right? The deepest expression of what you call your soul, right?
yeah.
And you would find a way to access that and bring that into being. When you think you got the perfect, for you, the perfect poem, whatever that is, but then you will never. You have to pay that with something. You will
Mm-hmm.
lose something, or you will never see the light that clearly, but you have seen it. You have known, but you will never reach again.
So now you're
So
getting personal on us, Tom.
no,
Yeah.
no, I'm asking you. I was asking that myself. The
Yeah.
price we have to pay for the deep experiences that we seek out.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
yeah, because,
Gurdjieff
like,
called
that,
that being obligation debt, right? You have to,
right? Who
you have
said
to,
that?
Gurdjieff. He says we have to pay a being obligation debt. Mm-hmm. You know,
Could you elaborate on that?
well, you have to, um, you have to give something up of your energy. He called it the work, and have to do that work, right? You can't just if you receive unmerited gifts, they always turn against you. you know so you need to merit it through the work. So that's you have to sacrifice your being, your energy, your time, your concentration into the task at hand. And that is being your being obligation debt. So you're not just born and then you die. You're born with an obligation, a debt, to give something back to, if you're religious, you would say God or the divine, but to give something. um that's the being obligation debt. So, even the Sufis had this idea that, if you go into deep samadhi, deep concentration that you're giving. You need to do that, or else there'll be war. And that's just kind of a mythological idea. If you don't give something back to the divine, then you just become mechanical, and you spiral into conflict, and then there is war. So often the reason war happens, it seems absurd why people just start killing each other. It's because they haven't made that obligate. They have the culture or the individual or hasn't made that particular sacrifice. So then some sort of demon takes over the whole society, and it just leads to ruin. So if you're doing meditation or something, it doesn't feel like a very utilitarian, practical thing to do. But if you're focusing towards a sublime task, I think that's actually anti-war, you know, behavior.
But don't you agree that, like, if you really do, I mean, and my stance toward this, my stance is that, the very sublime meditative states, they're
Hmm.
like on a, culturally speaking, like on a Pareto scale, like everything else. There can be just, a certain amount of Picassos, and the majority of painters are some not there. There are
Oh
like a
yeah.
couple of those, and so there's like a Pareto distribution. And so don't you agree that, these people that actually do attain these high states of meditation or, spiritual enlightenment, there is also always like an implicit cost, and this implicit cost is, in most of the cases, it's in the first moment, it's not known, but you pay. The more extreme your experience is and your achievement in whatever
Hmm.
realm, the higher the cost there is. And our society, it's kind of, like found an attractor where effort and cost is kind of minimal. You
Yeah,
can have
that's
like
why.
that you have a comfort life, and you
Mhm.
can flow by, for 60 years and then some sickness. But if you really want to excel, then you have to pay, and it's always very painful. And
Yeah, but
that's
it's
why.
also equally as joyful and intensely joyful as well. Like it's called Masuka, great joy as well. So it is intensely painful and intensely joyful simultaneously. That's kind of how I see it. And people don't want either. They want
Right.
just to live in this kind of mediocre fog and be safe. And that's most people. Just be safe, be in this fog and be safe, and have an okay life where nothing too bad happens, and get your kicks, and
Right,
then
that's
and then die. But that's
99% of
that's not
everybody.
a very big sacrifice. But
Right.
even those people have to sacrifice something if they want a family or a job. But they have to make some little sacrifice, and so
Right.
there is a sacrifice going down on every level of experience, right? Or an exchange of energies, you could say. I mean, Gertz is very profound in how he talked about that exchange of energies and on all the different levels. But I think the reason I think Luke's name for the course is very good, the hard way, because
Right.
that's what's needed for greatness. You can't sort of slip into some non-dual state just because you're lucky, um, where you because the non-dual people, the neo-advaita people say, oh, there's nothing, there's nobody, everything is peace and blah blah blah, and often they behave like total assholes or something. They're just not really. They've gone into a pseudo eros, as Mark calls it, or a pseudo spiritual state. And but the real thing, again, it's good to think of it as hard, because then we as the hard way, because then something is at stake. And then yeah, well, I was talking about this also. There's being and there's becoming. Being is not hard. Being is just a child playing with toys, and it's beautiful, and it's flowers, and then becoming is full of pain and sacrifice. Yeah.
That's what I mean. And so I think, like Zach Stein, he talks about, that crisis is, the uh, foremost element of transformation. And
Hmm.
so is catastrophe. And it's like
Mm.
if you really want to have spiritual attainment, it's like, no, you have to have a crisis like St. Francis from Assisi. It's like
Mm.
that is severe pain. And yes, there's embedded in the realization, there's ultimate joy and everything. But again, it's like you can't have anything of deep value without profound pain and crisis and everything.
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
and it's like what you do. It's like in our society, it's like, imagine you you actually do find some form of enlightenment. There's so much pain involved to try to translate that into normal behavior, into normal being, because there are some things that you just can't connect with the people with anymore. It's just because you're so far out there. And
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
so the secondary thing of certain peak experiences,
It's
it's
translation into an
yes,
embodiment and incarnation, I guess.
yes,
The incarnation process is painful as well, right?
yeah.
Something like that. Yeah.
And it's like everybody, and I wrote this paper. I think like everybody kind of tries to be spiritual nowadays, like in Boulder or in Ibiza or like wherever in Burning Man. But how the question is like, how would you scale your pain and suffering really, and your crisis
Mm-hmm.
in relationship to these kinds of things, or like in terms of artistic endeavors, what are you willing to endure? Um,
Yeah.
and so and so yeah.
Yeah, the word endure is it means hard as well. Endure in French, become hard. So I think often people endure, and that's what's wrong. Actually, like I could make another. I could look at the other side of this. It's not about enduring. It's about kind of spirit and strength and kind of like breaking through the Gorgon's knot, not just enduring existence.
Right. But still,
Um,
enduring is a crucial part of it. It's not the only part, but
yeah,
you have to be able to endure. Even
yeah,
if you just sit in meditation for 5 hours, that's some endurance training for your legs,
absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
for your emotions, whatnot. Or
Mhm.
if you're in a relationship. So I was wondering, it's like, because so I'm still working with Wilbur's book on Religion of Tomorrow. And what I noticed is like, and so he always refers to this the systems that we have, they're so old, they're so traditional, they're like thousands of years old, and they follow a certain, let's say, they follow a certain coding, and what's completely missing from all of these kinds of approaches is kind of a relationship yoga. We have jnana yoga, the yoga of philosophy. We have,
Oh,
bhakti yoga, like the your devotion to God. You have hatha yoga, you have jnana, raja yoga, and all these. What you don't have is illumination through relationship with the partner. I mean,
hmm,
maybe you have that. I don't know how that is in Buddhism, but it's like, at least in the West, it's not that, yeah, the relationship is a way. Relationship is a way to find the most sublime states of enlightenment, you
yep,
know, and there's a certain coding with this, and that's completely missing from all of this literature that you can. Well, I mean, it's not for everybody, but I mean, relationship enlightenment is not for everybody. But if you really are attuned to this, you can achieve through relationships so much. If the chemistry, and I mean chemistry, is just
yeah,
right, it
yeah.
propels you um
Well, in the
like
Eastern traditions, they have interesting kind of um, systems where you have a consort or something like that, and you do yogas, sexual yogas together, and then it's actually not like you want to achieve fusion with that person, right? You want to go beyond attachment. So
right.
it's kind of is right. So I think we mistake relationship as fusion. And that's the problem with the romantic relationship. You fuse with your other half, and you become one, or something like that. And that's what people look for in relationship. but actual relationship is never a fusion with the relative, you know, because you can't fuse with the relative. It doesn't work. And so so anyway, so if you, some people on the yoga path might have a consort and have to work through their attachment with that person, having all these experience, blissful, painful experiences with that person, and then move on, because just being there would be a, so that's a more refined kind of thing. Maybe it could be, but then there's also just love, right? Which is, I mean, bhakti yoga is all about, well, about just becoming intensely in love. I think that's what bhakti yoga is.
Now, originally it's mean devotion to God, no? It's like I do
Which
everything.
means the same thing as far as I'm concerned. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean something different with relationship yoga, because I mean
Yeah.
it's like you have the
You mean
very
in a couple?
yes. I mean, it's like you have, the very, I mean, still fulfilling but still banal kind of concepts of, fusion, what you say, and harmony and all of this. But I think like equally like in meditation or every yoga, you can scale it up, right?
Hmm.
Where when it's just right, you can use it to, attain similar states than in meditation. and
Yeah.
and there's not a lot of literature about, because it's such a complex because chemistry, be it like hormonal, be it psychological, be it whatever, it's such a weird thing, um, that it's very hard to describe how that scaling works, but I still think it is possible,
Yeah.
to get rid of all the attachment that are, necessarily part of relationships. And that's the, ego, non-ego, autonomy, community, all of these kinds of things can fall away. But then again, you also have to practice and you have to sacrifice all the things that make the relationship kind of earthly, you know?
Yeah. And I think yeah, I think also the mistake people get is, like, you talk about attaining states, but as soon as you attain a state, that state becomes a kind of a trap, kind of like Ulysses on his islands where he meets, all the, the sirens, or you get into states of bliss, and that, that, I mean, I've heard this described by people, by somebody, and by people, and that, you do, like in our tradition, you do deity yoga, and if you attain deity yoga, you're in such an incredible state of bliss,
Right.
that it's almost unbearable, and then after a while that becomes a really dangerous trap, and it's actually, that state of bliss becomes dangerous, and if you don't get out of that, you're in big trouble. So you have to move
And
into a state of nothingness, no thingness, right? And then that state also is not a full state, a fully realized place to be, because nothingness is like, this is how I've heard it described. Again, I'm only, this is, secondary information. I haven't attained these states myself, but I've heard it described as the state of nothingness being that you just lose all your existential anxiety completely.
right.
There's no more suffering, and you just could just die, or be no problem. This is how I've heard it described. And then, but then you need to be rescued from that state as well, because that state is obviously just useless, right? Finally, because you have to come to the world, and like in the Zen Oxfording pictures, you have to come back to the world, back to the marketplace with open hands, and bring some of your journey back into the system. So
Right.
then I guess the ultimate enlightenment is beyond all states, right? That's how it's usually described, right? So people get stuck in states,
And that
which
talking
which
about
is
that again. Yes.
isn't the point, right? Yeah.
Yeah, because then you have to pay up, and you can't. And the cost for trying to stay there is enormous. It's like
Uh-huh.
it's like,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. I
So
mean,
you
I've
have
heard
to sacrifice. Mm.
stories of somebody in just such incredible states of bliss, and then after a while they were just crying and weeping, and it was just terrible, because they that just, it becomes pain, or something. So it's
Right.
interesting, this pain bliss dynamic. I think the tantric schools are there to just sort of you go fully through that as completely and totally and intensely as you can, and then come out the other end. Um,
I mean, the interesting thing about this is, we tend to think of Jesus, baby Jesus story, sorry, as a kind of scapegoat mechanism, that he was sacrificed to for whatever cultural purpose. But the other way to read this is, that he had to sacrifice himself in order to become God. There's a pain, there's all, this debt, and you always find this debt with all these kind of people that are so hugely part of our culture that, I mean, yes, there's enlightenment, but then there's also, this huge debt that they had to pay, from because he knew what will happen, in the Garden Gethsemane, he knew exactly what will happen, but he had to take the cross. It's not just, a cultural scapegoat mechanism. It's also in a personal decision to bear the cross in a kind of way, and
well, yeah. Gerard would say that would be the lie, that it's that would be the false scapegoat, right? The false scapegoat would be that he died for our sins or something like that. That
I'm not saying this.
this is a terrible interpretation. Whereas the right interpretation, is that we have to do that. That's what he's saying. We have to take on the suffering, to a certain extent, rather than project that out towards other people and create conflict.
Yeah, I'm not saying this that he did this to relieve us of our sins. I'm saying, from an individual perspective, that Jesus as a person, right? Not
Yeah.
as a cultural phenomenon, as a person, as a
Mm-hmm.
symbol for what we can achieve. You have to, in a way, make the decision to sacrifice your life in a kind of way if you want to identify with God.
Yeah.
And so he took on the cross purposefully. And in,
Yeah.
in a way, um, this is true for all of these kinds of
Yeah.
people.
But I was like, if that's a critique of Gerard, I think Gerard would agree with
No,
you.
no, no, no. I'm not critiquing
What you were
Girard.
saying.
It's like
Hmm.
I think that there are different, perspectives that are equally valid. That make perfectly sense if you look at, the Wilberian kind of lower left quadrant and the cultural mechanisms that are at play. But if
Hmm.
you then Girard is certainly true. But if you switch to like the upper left quadrant, the more individual, that's like, no, no, there's a person that has to make a decision. And
Hmm.
baby Jesus Christ made the decision,
Or
right?
maybe he didn't. Maybe he was just crucified, but and he wasn't expecting that. Maybe he was
Well,
expecting
in the
something
Garden
else.
Gethsemane, he made the
Yeah.
decision.
Yeah. Yeah. But that's written by the disciples 100 years later. Uh, you know.
Everything
Um,
is written by the disciples. There's no film
yeah.
that
Yeah.
documentary
Well,
style.
I read an interesting psychological book about Jesus, kind of claiming that he was the ultimate revolutionary, right? And he was planning a revolution, and his revolution sort of failed, and he got crucified. And then but what he did was so powerful because the disciples would obviously interpret it like that, and create Christianity, etc., etc. But
Yeah.
um, that he makes like Marx and Lenin and Trotsky and all those guys look like kindergarten revolutionaries compared to what Jesus was as like Jesus was a revolutionary. That was the thesis of this book, just the psychology of how he approached um the empire.
Yeah.
But anyway, you're talking about something else. But then there's just the fact that he was just crucified, just killed, and he was innocent, and uh,
Yeah.
that's the more Gerard wants to strip away the mythological level or the even the
Yeah, but
spiritual
isn't it
level.
fascinating that as an occult symbol, you know, Jesus still for the last 2000 years and still, you know, invokes you know, argument and discussion and, you know, interpretations of what it is. It's
Yeah.
as an occult symbol, it's immensely powerful, independently of if there was a real person, Jesus,
Oh,
you know, just
absolutely.
so it's super interesting that for 2000 years we're still arguing about this. It's interesting to me, you know,
And
is
it
it really,
is sort of the ultimate occult symbol, isn't it?
yeah.
Like, what does that mean? What the fuck? Like, you know, why is this the ultimate symbol of a world religion with a billion people? Is a guy being, you know, nailed to a cross, and what's going on there? What the fuck? You know, it's like I remember feeling that as as even as a child. It's like, what the fuck?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But it's
Why is
saying,
it?
you know, it's talking about the crucifixion of the ego, right? That
Why is it
is the
so powerful?
spiritual
Yes. Mm.
spiritual alchemical process that we need to kind of go through on some level, or that we all do in one way or another.
Yeah.
That's why it's so universal, I think.
So for me, it's yeah. I mean, still we are approaching Christmas. You know, in 2 days, 3 days. You
Hmm.
know, it's like everything is structured around this powerful idea still, and we are claiming to be so enlightened and so wise, but it's like and we're seeking again. It's like with these books, this Americana. It's like, oh no, we need new values and yada yada yada. It's like, no, just how about looking at the values that we're acting upon, you know, right now. And it's like there's this discussion, you know, I saw that on Facebook, you know, that our spirituality is, you know, mostly Protestant, you know, and then a woman that we both know was saying, well, no, I'm not a practicing Christian, you know. And it's like, no, it's like we're all
We're all
acting,
Protestants. Yeah.
yeah, we're all acting like, culturally speaking,
Yeah.
you know. And it's like, instead of looking for new values, maybe we should look at the old ones first. And then there's this occult symbol that, you know, it's like that we are collectively praying to this Sunday, on, you know, although nobody really identifies with it.
And
It's like
nobody
this.
identifies with it at all anymore, believes in it or anything, but it's still there. It doesn't
Yeah,
go
yeah,
away.
yeah,
It's like no, the people, you couldn't have a less religious holiday, really. Like
yeah,
there's, it's the most unreligious holiday that ever existed, Christmas. And
yeah.
yet the fun, and it's become the opposite of what it's supposed to be. But then people still, that's still there. It's just doesn't go away
No, it's
because
mind-boggling.
it's true. There's something true, right, about that. I mean, this is why I argue with people who are sort of like radically anti-Christian. You know, even though I'm not a Christian and I don't want to be a Christian, but I think I think the story of Christ is true. Like it has all the archetypes in it. Everything is there. It's complete. It's a complete and it's a complete story of
Although that's already like an interpretation. I would say it's true because it's there.
what's the difference.
Because it's like, you know, I was thinking about, you know, so there are waves. I try to make like a metaphor now. And so a wave is true in the context of like the Mediterranean Sea. A wave that doesn't appear
Hmm.
is not true, right? And the symbol of Christ, whatever it means, you know, whatever of the thousand and myriad interpretation of what the symbol means, it doesn't really, it's not the point. The point is that the wave is still there. It's still
Yeah,
true. It's like
yeah,
we don't know what it means. It's truthiness or truthness comes directly from its existence, and we,
yeah.
you know, it's
Hmm.
it's it's
Well,
weird.
also, what is true? A true symbol system, never exhausts its meaning. It's never becomes like this is the meaning. It's always there's an openness to all the symbols. Like they could be there's an infinite variety of, as you say, of interpretation of what they could be, and that's what make them true, and not just strict ideology, right?
Right.
That's what makes them true and not ideological. That's why I think stories, these kind of stories, are more true than any modern ideology, because they can't be pinned down and explained, or even or exhausted in any way. They're infinite in their potential of interpretation and meaning. So that's why I would say they're true, not because it's true what Jesus said and
Yeah, I
this and
get
that, and it's not like it's not a dogmatic truth at all. It's just the truth. It's just true because it's deep and infinite. I
you
mean,
know what
it's
the weird thing is?
potential.
The weird thing is if you I mean like put yourself in a position of a god who is about to set up like a Western you have to redesign like a Western, civilization. And then you see, okay, at the center of it all is like a mimetic core idea that holds everything together. And you can
Mhm.
create the atom bomb and music, and you can have the Enlightenment and integral meta, like everything. But what the still which holds everything together is one symbol. And it's kind of weird. Like if you had to reverse engineer it, that's nearly impossible. So like how did we collectively come up with an idea that we are still gravitating around?
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
super
yeah.
it's super weird. If you like, who did this? Why did we do it? Which intelligence? And I'm not referring to God. It's like as a design problem.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
Like how would you come up with that shit like this, that you have like an idea that, as you
Well, you don't
said,
come out with it; it comes up
yeah,
by
how,
it
why,
emerges. It's
why?
people use this word emergence. What emerged? It emerged probably to it's there is a process of trying to understand what's going on. I think that's why I think it's and to deal with our suffering. I think it all comes down to. I mean, that's why the cross is also a symbol of suffering, and so our big question is like, why are we suffering, and why are we here, and why do we die, and so
Right.
it's just a symbol of suffering. But I have behind me like a yabyung, which is a symbol of of union and beauty and joy and transfer. The opposite, right? I'd like to put those two things together. I'd like if you had a cross and a yabyung, and
Yeah.
then you'd have the full story. Because if you just have a cross, then this is why society is so morbidly Protestant. I feel that they're just obsessed with the cross on some level, and they don't have that mahasuka of the other side. Um,
It's
like they have
interesting.
the sutric, but they don't have the tantric. Again, I mean, I think there is that does exist within Christianity somewhere in very hidden forms and could emerge on some level, but most of it is just Protestant. It's like the cross without the rose. Or
Yeah. It's still
why is there
interesting
no?
though why you have a cross representing pain and suffering. It's like a weird construction, right? To
Mhm.
signify the sacrifices and the debt that we have to pay in a kind of way.
Why? What's weird
Don't you
about
think
that?
it's a strange? Why not take
A
like
meat
like in
cleaver?
yeah, a meat cleaver or like a vagina dentata, as for the existential pain and suffering,
Hmm.
you know?
Hmm.
Why it's like, I mean, there's certainly studies about this, but it's like I find those things just interesting from a phenomenological standpoint, you know?
Well, it's sort of the four directions, and it's the center. He's in, and also the fact that Jesus is like he's hanging over. Even Illich talked about this. He's removed from the earth, right? Um, it's between heaven and earth. The biggest. I think crucifixion was the biggest shame because you didn't get a proper burial and you were removed from your earth. You were hanging above the earth, and this is kind of like the disembodiment of modernity or something. It's one interpretation.
No, I mean, I've read lots of stuff about the
Yeah.
what's it called, the iconography from the cross itself, but still, it's like there are other possibilities why
Mm-hmm.
we, to depict that, because other cultures depict that differently, that we kind of, zoned in on the, two
Well, there's
things.
always a tree, right? There's the ancient tree in in Slavic mythology. I forget what it's
Yeah,
called, or Nordic mythology. And then there's the tree of life in Kabbalah,
yeah.
and it's the tree of death. So it's like it's like the Svirot, or the tree of life, devoid of all the attributes, just naked, barren, empty of anything, and then a death hanging on it.
Mm,
Um,
yeah,
and
I
now we
don't
have
know.
this Christmas tree or something. It's like sort of the trying to we have death, and then the Christmas tree is sort of like the bringing ornateness and greenness and beauty back into the world, in the moment of darkness and the transformation. And
Yeah,
yeah, but yeah, we think we're so enlightened. Give me a break.
yeah.
We're so not enlightened. I mean, we're so just unbelievably not even even maybe we have some nice ideas that we got in the Enlightenment, to help us with science, and that's a good achievement. But
Please talk about only yourself, Andrew.
hmm?
I'm
Yeah,
joking.
I'm not very enlightened. What about you, Tom? You started saying that you wanted to be personal here, Tom. I want to hear some more
Oh, no. We were
personal shit.
very.
I want to hear some more personal shit from you. Come on, give our listeners something to hear that they can
Yes, I
chew on.
wish you all a very,
Oh,
very
fuck
nice,
off.
very nice Christmas and happy holidays. And I think we will hear each other next year again.
You
Uh,
didn't even mention titties or any of
oh
that.
no, now you do. It's a performative contradiction. Now we are. Let's end on some titties. Some. What are the thing that you put on the nipples? What are they called?
Twirly things.
Twirly things. They have a name.
Yeah. I don't know. I bet I forget. Yeah, there's somebody. Some very talented women can make them spin around. Right?
They should have
Yeah.
like Christmas hats as twirlies or something.
Twirlies. How do you do that? That must be you must be very talented to do something like. It's just such an amazing world, Tom. It's just such an incredibly beautiful world we live in. That
Yes.
people that like women with cowboy hats and rhinestone cowboy hats. I have this image of just like, a Christmas tree hat and then her little titties and then these things spinning around. It's like,
Wouldn't that be that?
doesn't that
Wouldn't
make you
that be?
feel good to be alive?
Yes. Wouldn't that be the perfect nativity scene? Christ on the cross and some hookers twirling their Christmas uh,
Yeah.
nipple covers, whatever. That
Yeah.
wouldn't be that the perfect depiction of our culture. You know.
That would be it. That's what we are. Yeah. We're the sublime and the ridiculous,
Yeah, I would think so.
yeah, we are that.
Girls twerking, while Jesus is dying. I think that's the image.
Oh my God, Tom, you don't give some people ideas out there. You might
I
just
know.
appear.
I'm
You
just,
know how things just appear in the internet? Like everything is so synchronistic. You have a thought. Oh, you
yeah.
thought that. You're going to see that in a moment. You're going to go online and you're going to there's an image of that is going to appear on Twitter.
I
And
hope
it's
so.
because an AI is going to, I've heard our conversation and
Yes.
that's what's going to happen, man. It's just like we're entering this insanely bizarre bardo. Uh,
If we're on the right track, that should happen. I'm
yeah.
not fearing this. I'm looking
No.
forward. I'm looking as a confirmation, as if we're right about what we're saying, then that will appear. And so I urge everybody who listens to this fucking podcast, if you see that image out there,
Yeah.
Christ,
Christ and
surrounded by,
twerking
yeah, Christ and
and
working
nipples
and nipples,
spinning
then
around.
get back to us. And,
Yeah. And send
so
it out and we'll just prove to you that it's like that miracles do happen. That there are
miracles do happen. Yes, exactly.
Jesus could walk on water, All of that
And
cynicism and modernity is just a load of crap. We've proved it.
yes, so let's look
The
out for.
AIs with the AIs and with Jesus, and Jesus is in the AI.
Yeah,
Basically, that's what we're saying. He's there. Don't worry, everybody. Jesus is in the AI.
yes.
Good old Jesus in the AI, and, we're all going to be okay. Um,
Happy holiday. Happy
Hey,
holidays.
happy holidays too, Tom. This is where we should end off. Okay.